We start off the episode with Thetis and Thrag giving their little speeches. It's cool. I don't really have much to say on it. They're not generational speeches, neither of them are Erwin, but we will see that Thetis' speech is better, which gives us a bit of insight as to how this episode is gonna go for these two, but that's something I'll cover later. Let's start off with the best part of the episode, Oliver and Nolan's conversation and subsequent bonding time. I don't think it's a very hot take to say that this is the best part of the episode, other than maybe that beautifully rendered explosion that takes place when Mark and Oliver punch through Thrag's ship later in the episode. Mwah! But enough about explosions, back to talking. Oliver and Nolan obviously needed this conversation, and while this was a much more muted affair in the comics, the show has changed Oliver. Before, he was a more rational type of character who spoke kind of like those Reddit atheists. Now he's more of a normal kid. I think this is generally a better approach than what the comics took, and this conversation proves it. I like that they're building off organically on the additions that they've already made, and that these new additions are meshing with the main plot rather than just adding on subplots. Oh yeah, also, what's with this albino Viltrumite? She looks cool and I don't remember her in the comics. Hopefully she shows up again. Thetis is such a boss. I love this shot of him absolutely decking the shit out of Krieg, and he in general has really gone up in my estimation over this episode. Even having read the comic before, he still manages to look better here, I think. He's really roughing it out, and that's commendable when he's been spending most of his time hidden. It'd be easy to assume he's a coward, but nope, he's the last line of defense. Thrag, on the other hand, becomes a little unforgivable. First is the infamous "No!" scream, but I'm honestly not a fan of any of his portrayal so far. I was looking forward to him, obviously, because he's an aura farmer and a real demon and whatnot, but his voice and the way he's posed aren't really doing it for me here. For me, his voice is too deep for how he looks. It's the same issue with Conquest not looking nearly rugged enough for that smoker voice. The voice is okay, it just doesn't fit him. A more regal-sounding baritone would fit the way his Thrag looks, since he already has a youthful quality, and by stretching out the Telescria battle, he sort of looks like a fake demon for not showing up. And speaking of which, one thing I want to cover in this episode specifically is the page count. This is 2 issues worth of story, which is 40 pages. 20 pages per issue, it's pretty easy to count. Now what this means for a 48-minute episode is that each page ends up being a little over a minute, not including scenes which are new like Omni-Man struggling against the bugs and the egg subplot. Yes, Mark didn't need the eggs in the comic, and Omni-Man didn't actually struggle against that bug. He just used the patented Viltrumite slash in order to get it. I think that this slow adaptation leads to what I call One Piece syndrome. It's where you take a bunch of pages and need to stretch them out into a longer episode, which means that you need to turn segments that are 1 page into 5-minute sequences, or so on and so forth. And this ends up being an issue, especially in the latter half of this episode where Thrag attacks Telescria, because doing so introduces plot issues that weren't there in the original. For instance, I saw some people wondering why Thrag didn't exit the ship and join the fight. In the show, it's many minutes between the ship coming to attack and Mark and Oliver breaking it. But in the comic, it's only 9 pages before they do. It's a lot more reasonable of a time frame, especially because they spend one of those pages worrying about the traitor, this fat McDonald eating motherfucker here. In the comic, Tech Jacket got a little crushed by Anissa, yes, but it was because she attacked him from behind and only had control for 2 pages. Meanwhile in the show, Anissa is dragging Tech Jacket through buildings and just generally thrashing her. It gets to a point where, I sort of have to recommend the comic over the show because as I'm rereading parts of the comic that the episode goes over, I really can't stress enough on how it's better. All the things that should be making the TV adaptation go harder, the audio, the movement, the ability to direct in more interesting ways, it's not really there, and the story, which is what we're all here for,
there's still something you need to address!
Now, there's this massive thing that I'm obviously late to, but it wasn't worth a whole video on it, so I'm just gonna include it here. A storyboard revisionist who shall remain unnamed because I don't like outing people made a very poorly received video which was quickly deleted off of TikTok. Playing the original audio would be detrimental to her cause, so I'll tell you what she said instead and go over whether or not I agree. 1. She claims that the Invincible fandom is wildly sexist. This is partially true. As is the case of all nerdy male-centric fandoms, there are going to be sexist people in it. I can't pretend that I haven't seen people like this in the fandom. I do not believe that this is reflective of the fandom as a whole, however, and there are legitimate, non-sexist reasons to be iffy on the gender swap, which I'll go over later. I'm proud of every one of my subscribers and viewers for not being sexist. Shout out to you all. 2. She claims that there are people who say that they're fine with the gender swap because Zoe is a love interest for Oliver. This might be because I am sequestering myself to the Reddit, Twitter, and YouTube side of the fandom, and I also did a brief check on Tumblr, but I have never seen this sentiment expressed. Not once. I've seen people upset because they believe that Zoe is a love interest for Oliver, but I have never seen people happy that this is the case. I'm not saying these people don't exist, but I haven't seen them across 4 platforms, and so I'm gonna assume that this is false. Claims 3 and 4 are the infamous "women are autonomous beings" and "when writing a story, your character should service the plot as a whole" claims. I'll discuss those together since I can. Generally speaking, when writing a story, characters are not autonomous beings. They are props to serve the plot, not real people. This applies to both men and women. Charitably speaking, what she meant by this was women can be involved in their own plots unrelated to a man. In all of fiction, this is true, but in the case of Invincible, it's false. All of the major female characters in Invincible have been defined by their relationship to other men, often romantically. Debbie is defined by her relationship to Nolan and Mark. Eve is defined by her relationship to Rex and Mark, and now just Mark. We don't even see her alone, let alone pursuing her own interests or goals or interacting with her own friends separate from Mark's. Amber had her relationship with Mark, and after they broke up, she disappeared. Shrinking Ray was entirely a prop for Rexplode, Monster Girl to Robot/Rudy/Rex, and Kate is completely tied to the Immortal now. The only single female character is Anissa at this point in time. Being in a romantic relationship isn't a bad thing, but it is worth noting that Invincible consistently places its female characters in relationships with male characters who are more plot relevant than they are, and tossing them aside when the relationship ends. Cough cough. Shrinking Ray not showing up at Rex's funeral. Cough cough. So yeah, overall, it's not a great video, and Invincible could definitely stand to do better with its female characters. Back to our regularly scheduled programming. Anyways, I find the Tech Jacket gender swap problematic because she's done nothing but serve as a damsel in distress for these past episodes. Yeah, they allowed Space Racer, Omni-Man, Mark, Alan, and Thetis to get individual wins over Viltrumites, but she only gets wins on fodder. At that point, she's no different from any one of the millions of soldiers that these people have working for them. Tech Jacket was always the least effective of the group in the comic, but if you're gonna gender swap her, you should at least give her enough wins to make her stand on her own and not look like a liability. I also find it pretty funny how every fan art I've seen of her makes her look much better and have way more of a personality. So yeah, in the red corner, we got Thrag, fraud of frauds, the fraud regent, whatever you want to call him. In the blue corner, we have Tech Jacket, the fraud jacket, Fraud E. Thompson. Comment down below who you think is the biggest fraud, and thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe.